Hi everybody again. So we'll continue with our chapter 2 and we'll be continuing with the same example of the Whistler PC. And now in the previous time I couldn't populate this using the Excel function. I think I fixed that. I missed the quotes on top. That was the only error. So if you want to use the content function, make sure you use the quotes. Okay, that's your criteria. And you drag it down, you should get some sort of similar values as long as you change 300,000 and so on. And sometimes it might not be as useful and sometimes it will be easier to just count, but however you do it, you could use Excel functions. Again, I recommend trying to use Excel functions as much as possible for your own development. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to know is knowing how to construct what is called as frequency polygons. So frequency polygons are otherwise known as just like some sort of scatter plot. It's another term you would have learned. And so when you're trying to do some sort of scatter plot or frequency polygon, as your textbook calls it, instead of trying to have ranges, it's nice to have some sort of like a unique value. But instead of, again, like if you try and do a scatter plot of all this, right? Let's try and do a simple scatter plot of all the observations together. And if you put them as a scatter plot, and again, like a line, this is not useful, right? Like what can you make from this data? This is just a bunch of lines and data points. Even if you have a bunch of scattered data like this, in terms of a scattered data, it's not very useful to look at 85 data points. You're not getting anything meaningful from it. And so in order to summarize this in a more meaningful manner, you try and reduce the number of data points into something similar, like 7 classes again. Okay, so here we're going to be using the same classes, except the last class, I'm going to try and we know that our maximum, the most expensive house is $2 million. And I'm going to try and set like an extra $100,000 over, and the class interval is again 300,000. So the last class, instead of being greater than 1.8 million, is going to be between 1.8 million and 2.1 million. Okay, and so this list price, instead of listing intervals in the list price, I'm going to try and do something of like find out the midpoint range and just give that as a value. So what this first data point roughly says is, it's not accurate, but it gives you, when you're trying to summarize data, you try and lose some accuracy to understand the data better. You're saying there are roughly 25 observations or 25 listings at the $150,000 price range, so that's a simplification, but it works well in terms of summarizing data. And then you're saying, well, this 8 observations or 8 listings in the $750,000 price range, so if you want to summarize the data this way. So once you reduce the data this way, you could try and get a scatter plot from it, and a scatter plot or the frequency polygon, and this would give the data meaningful, right? Like it'll give the data some meaning. So x-axis is the price range here, and y-axis is the number of listings. Again, when you're trying to present a report in any format, make sure you do that. For the purpose of video, I'm not going to try and add an x-axis and y-axis every time. But this gives you some sort of nice data point over here and scatter plot. Okay, so this data again is not perfect, and you could always change the format chart area. I could right click and format chart area, and then here I could go to size and options, and I could always try and change values over here. So in the chart options here, I don't want this to go to 2.5 million. So the horizontal value axis, I click on that, and the axis options. So this minimum and bounds over here. Instead of 2,500, I want it to stop at 2,100. Okay, so once I click that and come out, see the 2,100 is my maximum value. So you could automatically start changing values, and so it's still not perfect. Now Excel gave me new problems over there. So let me go back and format the chart area again, and horizontal value axis, axis option, minimum value, I'm going to keep it at 0 and not at auto. Okay, and so this makes it a lot neater in terms of, and you could also change a lot more values, because our interval is 300,000, whereas the automatic interval size is 500,000 here. So if you want to change that as well, you could change the horizontal value axis and axis options, and units is like 500 minor 100. So you could make this as 300. Okay, so this gives you 0 to 300, 600, 900, and so it's a little more detailed now, and it's a little nicer to look at. And you can play around with these functions in Excel to try and produce better graphs. This is your first step in knowing what you want to do, or how to present the graph in a much better way. And making graphs out of data is one thing which business graduates do, and you get good at this. This is a frequency polygon. So another way to try and think about like how this can be useful is like, let's say this is the list price for, I'm going to try and move this data over here. This is the list price for for the year 2018. Okay, and then you have this value, and then you have another list price. The list price kind of remains the same, or the number of listing is like 2018, and for 2019, let's say some of these values change. The house price has increased a little bit more. So this is 23, this is 25, this was 9, and the rest kind of remain the same. If you try and think about it that way. Okay, maybe something changed a little bit, but overall the number of listings roughly remain the same. And if you want to try and, now you could do a new scatter plot based on years. Oh, okay, I messed that up. Okay, I need to play around a little bit, but you could kind of compare the data points between these two, where you could graph one graph on top of the other, and that would give you a good comparison, as in page 32, I believe. Yes, page 32, chart number 2.5. If you overlay graphs from 2 different years, that'll give you a nice area as to which kind of in which price range did the changes happen the most, you know. So by eyeballing the numbers, most of the price increases happen in the lower end of the market, you know, and you could see that in the graph a lot better to figure out. I'll try and add it in the next video. But in the higher end of the price range, there was not much price movement for the houses. The luxury houses were remained around the same price as the previous year, whereas the lower end of the market changed a lot more. Okay, so this is something, this is your frequency polygon, and we'll talk about overlaying this graph and cumulative frequency polygons in the next video. Right, see you then. Bye.